Krishna. Welcome back to our study of the Yoga Sutras. Today we are going to discuss Sutra number 17, which is perhaps one of the most challenging sutras to understand. Various commentators have given elaborate details about this particular sutra, because this sutra is going to take us into the deeper states of what a yogi experience in their very advanced meditative practice. Very quickly, how did we come to this point? We began this book by the defining statement, Yoga Sutras Nirodha. Then in Sutras 3 and 4, we saw what happens when the Nirodha happens and what otherwise. And then we saw a whole list of what these Chitta Vrittis are from Sutras 5 to 11. And then in the last few sessions, we saw what is this yoga, what a practice that one needs to do, centered around Abhyasa and Vairagya. So what is the methodology of controlling the Chitta Vrittis? We described about practice and detachment, and what are the further details about this practice and detachment. So now Patanjali is trying to consolidate all this basic information into describing what happens to a yogi in their advanced states of internalizing these meditative practices, right? And in these next few sutras, he's going to talk about the inner stages of Samadhi. He specifically uses the term Sampragyata Samadhi, and there is the other kind of Samadhi, which we will elaborate upon in the future session. So today our focus will be on understanding Sutra number 17, where Patanjali is going to define this state of Sampragyata Samadhi. Right? This is how the sutra goes. Vitarka vicharananda smitanugamat sampragyataha. Right? What does it mean? Vitarka. Vitarka means reasoning, logical deduction, analytical reasoning. Vichara is reflection. Ananda, kind of a very experiential state, rejoicing something, experiencing that inner bliss, right? And asmita. Asmita here means a sense of identity, I amness, that I-ness. That is what asmita means. So these vitarka, vichara, ananda, and asmita rupa, right? So these are the forms that anugamat. Anugamat means to follow in a succession, like in a sequence. So this sequence is what that leads up to what Patanjali defines as sampragyataha. Sampragyata, the word pragya. Pragya here means, very deep intelligence. And sampragyata, samyak rupena, which means that, very comprehensive intelligence. And which means at that stage, one has very high ability of discernment, right? So which means this sampragyata is a stage of practice where with very high level of discernment, the yogi is going into their inner states of calmness and are able to reduce this chitta vrittis, right? So this is how the translation goes. The sampragyata samadhi, samadhi with discernment, follows the stages of absorption in reasoning, reflection, rejoicing, and a sense of I-ness, right? Now let's see what exactly these aspects are. If you remember in the previous session, we spoke about how the Purusha has been covered by various layers of matter, right? At the most subtle layer, there is the false ego, the influence in the mind. Then little physical layer, there is the body and senses, and beyond that are the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, right? And we spoke about this very stage by stage, the sequential process of vairagya or dispassion, starting from yatamana, from disengaging, all the way to paravairagya, the highest form of dispassion, where one goes beyond the modes. Now we are going to use this technique of dispassion. It's a practice and dispassion. Remember, abhyasa and vairagya. We're going to use this technique to slowly unpeel those layers. Remember, we learned the term called as involution, right? There has been an evolution of material consciousness, right? Our pure consciousness of the soul has been influenced by matter, and therefore we are strongly identifying with these outer layers of matter. Now we're going to peel all those layers, and this process of materially involuting, right, is something that Patanjali is going to describe in this sutra. And how does this involution happen, right? It all begins because it's a conscious effort. Right now, remember we discussed the analogy of going uphill, right? You cannot just go uphill on your own, right? You have to make a conscious effort, because the gravity is pulling you down. Likewise, material energy is pulling you down. Therefore, there has to be a very conscious effort put by the yogi at this stage. Mind you, later on in the book, we are also going to talk about some advanced yogis who have reached such high levels of spiritual awareness that they need not put this kind of conscious effort. They are already in that state of enlightenment, right? But at this stage, the yogi has to make a conscious effort. And because it is a conscious effort, the word sampragyata has been used, right? Which means, or to give you a more relatable example, right? Imagine when you first time learned driving, right? And when you are learning as a new driver, you have to make a very conscious effort to drive, right? You are very cautious. Okay, now this is the speed, this is the gear I need to maintain. Oh, there's an obstacle which has come. Let me slow down, let me brake, let me press the clutch, let me shift the gear down. Again, let me raise the accelerator. See, we become very conscious in our effort. Whereas for a very advanced driver, all these mechanics which I just mentioned happens very easily, right? It's a very unconscious competency that they have. So drawing parallels with that, at this stage, the yogi is making a very conscious effort, sampragyata, right? And what happens next? It all begins with vitarka, reasoning. One empowers one's, mental capacities of reasoning. At this stage, our internal state, in the object of our meditation, is very much in a physical state. We have a very physical conception of the object of our meditation, right? And as it deepens beyond reasoning, beyond logic and reasoning, comes the state of vichara. Vichara is reflection. Now, this is a very intuitive stage. At this stage, we are not just stuck at a physical, notions, but we go beyond the physical to conceptual notions. Like when I look at a pot, I look at a pot as a pot, right? That's a very physical way of, discernment. But at vichara stage, I no more look at it as a pot, but I look at it as an accumulation of mud. Mud has transformed into, something substantial in the form of a pot. See, now I'm looking at things one level deeper. Beyond vichara comes the stage known as ananda. Ananda is a stage which is a very experiential stage, right? Beyond logical reasoning, beyond intuitive reflection, comes the stage of experience. Because finally, that is what is reality for us, right? What we experience is real for us, not just abstract logical conceptions or intuitive, reflective conceptions, but experience is real for us. And now we see the yogi goes even more deeper in their perception of that object. And beyond that, even the object kind of fades away, and all that remains is a sense of I-ness. Now, all this may seem very abstract. So I will try to give you an example by which one can relate with these inner states of a yogi. Mind you, like I said, no words can perfectly capture these internal states of the advanced yogi. However, we get to see into the chitta of an advanced yogi thanks to these descriptions by Patanjali. Otherwise, many of these, even many classical and contemporary commentators, while commenting on this sutta, they explain that no length of description can ever do proper justice to this stage. However, we can get some faint idea by understanding with the following example. Right? Imagine a scenario. Now, this is the scenario where the Purusha, covered by the false ego, the intelligence, and the mind. Now, mind you, these layers which I have put there, this is just the subtle body. Between the Vedantic school and the Sankhya/Yoga school, there is a small difference of opinion as to which layer comes first. Right? In the Vedantic school, it's the false ego, which is the immediate layer. In the Sankhya Yoga schools, it's the buddhi or intelligence, but that really doesn't matter at this stage. What we're trying to represent here, you can see those layers have a lot of fluctuations, a lot of vrittis, chitta vrittis going on. So this is the chitta, which is the accumulation of mind, intelligence, and ego. And this chitta is right now in a fluctuated stage. When you begin your meditation, what happens? Slowly, we are trying to reduce the chitta vrittis. But remember, to meditate, I need an object of meditation. And if you remember, we discussed this term when we were discussing the chitta vrittis. I use a term called as a pratyaya, like a mental notion, something that the mind holds on to while meditation. And in this case, let us take the example of a rose. So one takes up a pratyaya of a rose and begins one's meditation process. And the vitarka stage begins, when the reasoning stage begins, what happens? Slowly, all the chitta vrittis, they start stabilizing. The chitta is still there. It's not completely gone. Its effect is completely not gone away, but it becomes relatively much stable than what happens otherwise. As a vitarka stage, At this stage, in the mind of the yogi, remains just the physical form of a rose. That's it. It's just a rose, just perhaps a picture, just the outer frame of the picture is all that remains. But as one goes to vichara, reflection, right? So at this stage, you can describe in English language, if you were to put what would be the state of the yogi, you can say the yogi is thinking, I am meditating on a rose. That would be the description. As one goes to vichara stage, what happens? The rose now becomes alive. Now at this point, it's not just a physical rose, but it's a conceptual rose, because rose means many things. Rose means, it has red color. It has beautiful fragrance. It has very soft petals. It also has a green color leaf and perhaps some thorns. You see, the entire conceptual understanding of a rose gets revealed. Or in short, the rose becomes alive in the meditation of the yogi. And at that point, one is not just meditating on the rose, but rather one begins experiencing the rose in its entirety. This is a more deeper state of internalization. And as a yogi progresses further, right, beyond this vichara comes a stage of ananda. At this stage, the rose kind of fades away. And just as you're smelling the rose, imagine you're smelling the rose, you close your eyes and you even forget that there's a rose in your hand, but you're just so absorbed in the smell. Ah, what a beautiful rose. You're just rejoicing. At that point, if you were to describe the yogi state, the yogi would be just saying, I am experiencing. The rose has kind of faded away in the background. And you notice on the left side what is happening. Slowly, the conceptions, the influence of the mind kind of fades away. The intelligence fades away. At this stage, what that remains is still that ahankara, that still remains. And beyond ananda, even that I am experiencing slowly fades away as you are smelling that rose and even experiencing, even with that experience, if you were to zoom in further and take that whole experience moment by moment, even that kind of experience fades away, and all that remains is a conception of, look, I am. Even, practically the entire chitta vrittis have faded away. The chitta in itself slowly moves away in the background. The yogi doesn't even feel the presence of the chitta, right? And all that remains is a sense of I-ness. I am. That's it, right? That is the most deepest state at this point, right? The asmita. So you can see how from vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita, how from external to subtler and subtler and subtler states the yogi is going into. And this stage is a very deep stage. So mind you, as you can see from the diagram, there is still the influence of chitta. It is described that there are still some small traces of some sattvic influences. Sattva is also a guna, a material mode. And there are still some sattvic influences still left. And a yogi has to go beyond this also. That is a stage which Patanjali is going to talk about at the end of this particular chapter, right? So this is the understanding of going from vitarka, vichara, ananda, and asmita, right? From I am meditating on a rose to I am experiencing a rose to I am experiencing to I am. So you see, even the sentence is involuting in itself. Like that, the yogi's chitta is also involuting. It's going inwards from the external, from the physical to subtle and subtle. Now, for many of us, you may find this concept very abstract. So there's a very nice commentator named Vijnana Bhikshu, who gives a very theistic understanding of this technique. In a theistic context, how does a yogi meditate? What is the pratyaya? It says in the vitarka form, in the vitarka stage, one just fixes one's mind on the form of the Lord. That just the outline, just the form of the Lord in entirety. And gradually, as one deepens one's dhyan, one's meditation, right? What comes? Vichara, where one fixes one's consciousness on just one characteristic of the Lord. Like for example, his beautiful smile. And one is just absorbed in that state. And as one is absorbed in that smile, gradually that ananda comes, where one is the bliss of realizing the Lord comes and starts to rejoice so much. And beyond this ananda comes the stage, asmita, where one directly experiences the Lord. It is as good as, a person standing in front of you and what kind of a reciprocation you will have. That kind of an experience the consciousness gets. That is the stage of asmita. So it's a very theistic understanding of these different stages of sampragyata, right? So these are the mysteries, of the inner workings of a yogi's mind as they go deeper and deeper into the states of samadhi, right? And this is what Patanjali has given us. And this is, a very advanced state of practice. Do not worry if you're not able to relate with this. Later on in the second chapter of the book, Patanjali is going to lay out a framework wherein gradually we can come to a stage where we can qualify ourselves to experience these deeper states of meditation, right? So this is the whole concept of Sampragyata Samadhi. Summarizing, we learned 3 key concepts. 1, Sampragyata means where there is a conscious effort being put. The yogi still needs to make a conscious effort. And therefore, Patanjali differentiates it by using the term Sampragyata Samadhi, right? And then we saw how at this stage, by deepening one's meditation, the pratyaya involutes, the chitta involutes. So from a very physical form to a conceptual form to an experiential form to deep down to a sense of identity. This is how the chitta involutes, right? And finally, we discussed how these 4 stages of vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita, as advanced as they are, however, this is still not the final stage because, as I mentioned, there are still some small traces of the chitta still left. There are still some sattvic influences still left. The real perfection of self-realization is when one goes beyond the influence of these 3 gunas, right? And that is something we'll discuss in the later on sections of this book. All right. So thank you so much for joining us for this session. In the next session, we are going to discuss perhaps what is the most debated sutra, because different commentators have different opinions about this sutra. So stay tuned and join us for the next session. See you all very soon. Hare Krishna.